Hey, Team BCN. Thanks so much for joining us for today's podcast celebrating Black History Month. As you may know, February is a federally recognized celebration of the contributions Blacks and African Americans have made to this country and a time to reflect on the continued struggle for racial justice. Krizia, Cabrera, Torro, and Ashely Holt, regional DEI managers in Northern and Central Kentucky, join us today to share more about that and how we can participate. Ladies, welcome back. Thanks for joining us again today.
Thank you for having us.
Hey!
Hey, absolutely. Krizia, kick us off by telling us how Black History Month began.
So like other heritage months, it actually started as a week in the 1920s. It was the week of Abraham and Frederick Douglass' birthdays. So I believe that's February 12th. That's the week of wherever that day falls. That used to be Black History Week. And then in the 1970s, it became Natural Heritage Month. So it became a natural recognized federal month. And it all started in the 1920s by a historian called Carter G. Woodson. So he was a Harvard historian. There is an institute in Berea College dedicated under his name. So if you want to learn a little bit more about that, you can look that up. It's here in Kentucky. So he was actually the one who pioneered and fought for Black history to be recognized as an important aspect of our American history.
That is awesome. Ashely, do you want to jump in on this question?
Well, she covered a lot of it, but I really just think it's important if you ever get a chance to learn a little bit more about Carter G. Woodson, please check out the Institute at Berea for Carter G. Woodson. A lot of his works and his writings and things are there. And he was very influential in the establishment of Berea College.
Okay, wow. I did not know this, and I did not know that it was in our state. So that's like 2 hours away. That's really great.
Yeah.
Yes.
Also, I like to point out that Black History Month is also celebrated in Canada and the UK.
Oh,
So we are not the only country that does Black History Month.
that's awesome. Why is it so important, Ashely, that we celebrate Black History Month?
Um, the Black history is influential throughout history. There's Black influence in many things, from the science to the arts, to the culinary, to the education. Black history is everywhere. And it's really important that we take the time to recognize, acknowledge, and celebrate that within our countries and within our communities. The Black people have been one of the nation's most oppressed people. So now it's time to really just celebrate the greatness and the influence in which Blacks have contributed to our being.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Krizia?
I agree with everything that Ashely says. It's important. I think also, even though it's Black history, it's still American history.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's something that we should all recognize, because everything that they've gone through, from the bad, the good, the bad, and the ugly, it's important and it's part of our history.
Mm-hmm.
So we should acknowledge their triumphs, their challenges, and the oppression that they have gone through throughout many years and still do to this day.
Mm-hmm.
In hopes that history doesn't repeat itself and we can make a new history.
Absolutely.
Agreed.
So
but before we, sorry.
Oh no, it sounds like you want to say something before I move on to the next question. So please go ahead.
Oh, I wanted to just say, before we move on, I want to acknowledge a couple of people in particular. You'll be learning about them throughout the Navigator notes, but in case you didn't get a chance to read through their whole history, there's some Kentuckians that we would like to highlight. I don't know if I'll do two. Ashely can do the last two. One of them is Bertha Whitby. She was from, and I'm going to do my notes. I'm sorry because I can't remember everything from everyone.
What? You don't have their entire history memorized,
I
Krizia?
do. I should, right? Like I'm a fourth grader doing an oral report. Um, Actually, so Bertha Whitby was Louisville. She was an educator, and she had a bad experience with the police. Her teenager was mistreated, and she wanted to make a change. So one of the things that she did was she got involved with the police and the law, and she petitioned for and became Louisville's first African American policewoman. This was actually 2 years after women earned the right to vote. And this is well before, so this was 1922. So this was well before civil rights movement. So she was a powerhouse, and she was a civil rights advocate from in an era which was very hard to do so. Mm-hmm. Then there's also Flora B. Pounder from Elton, Kentucky, and she was the first African-American registered nurse at the Louisville General Hospital. So I want to recognize some of our nurses because our nurses are super important in our organization. So yeah. Do you want to do the last two, Ashely?
Yeah, and I'm also going to read my notes because I'm new to this information as well as we prepared for this. Viola Davis Brown. She was the first African American admitted to nursing school in Lexington. Brown attended the Nather School of Nursing, which was affiliated with St. Joseph Hospital, where Brown would be promoted to the hospital supervisor in 1960. Her promotion was another first for African Americans in Lexington. The first two African American RNs to receive advanced practice as nurse practitioners in Lexington. She was one of the first nurse practitioners. And I don't know about you all, but I love the nurse practitioner.
Same.
So, yeah. I do too.
Viola was very instrumental with that. And then last, John Henry Sr. Holmes. He was a doctor in the late 1800s, an activist who fought for the welfare and the rights of Blacks in Winchester, Kentucky, right down the road. Mm-hmm. Heavily active in politics and owned his own practice.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. A little quick story about him. He actually performed an amputated surgery in his own practice, not in the hospital, in the late 1800s.
Wow.
I remember reading that about him and finding that fascinating.
Yes. Well, thank you so much. I know this is a little snapshot of each person, and there are many, many more that we could talk about. But thank you so much for giving us just a little preview, I guess, if you will, of what these people have done. So
there's just so much rich history from Kentucky, especially Black history. And so I'm sure if you look at whatever county in which you serve, you can find a little piece of that there.
For sure. For sure. So shifting gears a little bit, I want to talk about what the Black experience in the healthcare arena has been like. So what has it been like in the U.S.?
So one of the first things that we have to start with, and it might be uncomfortable for some, but one of the things that we all have to learn, as especially if we're not of Black descent or African American descent, is that when you're learning this, there might be topics that might make you feel uncomfortable, but it's good to be in that uncomfortableness. I know that's not a word, but just go with me to be uncomfortable, because that's how you grow and that's how you challenge yourselves. So one of the first things was that slaves were used for medical research way early in the game. It was 1700s, and they were used for medical research. Like, for example, in the field of gynecology, the vaginal speculum was actually used on, they would test it on slaves to just make sure it was working, and it was developed by the use, yes, it was developed by the use of slaves without their consent, because they were used seen as property. So gynecology was a field that advanced a lot because of female slaves. So we owe that to them. Another thing is experiments done without their consent, like smallpox. They were injected smallpox to see the effects of the virus. It's a virus, right? I believe so.
We'll say it is today.
The nurses will come to me and tell me if it's not. But it actually was tested on them without their consent, and that's what I wanted to say. And in order to understand more the progression, the effects, and everything. So Black people have been used in medical history for a long time, and they have been not willing participants. Some of them didn't even know that they were being used for medical research, and that is something extremely important, because without them, we wouldn't know what we know. But at the same time, this was without their consent, so this was done wrongly.
Right. So we owe them a lot, but I also feel horrified at the same time by what we know because of these experiments.
Yeah, there were atrocities that they were being committed. And this and other experiments have led to this misbelief or misconception that Blacks and African Americans have a higher tolerance to pain. And it's to this day, actually, that recent studies have shown that medical doctors think that Blacks and African Americans have a higher tolerance of pain, when there has been no proof of that, because we're human. We all me might handle pain in a different way, but we are human all. The race doesn't necessarily equate with higher or lower pain tolerance. So that is a misbelief that has come out of that misuse, and I don't want to say misuse, I want to say atrocious acts against slaves.
Absolutely.
I don't know if Ashely wants to lead us into talking a little bit of the Tuskegee study.
Oh, yeah, I was going to mention that. So one of the other things that happened was the Tuskegee study. And I just want to go over my notes a little bit because I want to make sure that I get this totally right. The goal of the Tuskegee study was to observe the natural history of untreated syphilis in Black populations. But the subjects were completely unaware and were instead told that they were receiving treatments for bad blood, when in fact they were receiving treatment. They weren't receiving any treatment at all. And they were forced to end the study in 1972 because of a whistleblower. And 70% of the participants died, and wives were given syphilis. Children were born with syphilis. It has just left some horrible generational impacts. Another one that I found very interesting, and I did not know about myself until probably the last few years when it was on mainstream media, and that was the story of Henrietta Lacks. And her story comes from her having immortal cells, and they were used to research numerous diseases such as cancer, AIDS, and polio. And over 10,000 patents evolved from the use of her cells. She nor her family ever received any compensation for that at all.
They took her cells, and while they took a piece of her body without her consent. Again, they found out that they could create an immortal cell line that they could use for research. And it's used in classrooms to teach, because it's a great immortal cell line, because you can keep cultivating it. And this was all done without her consent, without any compensation to her. And between all the patents and all the research that has been done, neither her or her family ever got any type of compensation, like Ashely said.
Oh my goodness.
So all, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say this question is obvious, I think, given the stories that you've just told me. But can you talk a little bit about the medical mistrust in the Black and African American communities?
Yeah, Krizia mentioned a little bit about that earlier, about just the Blacks having a higher tolerance of pain, or Blacks not being considered to be human and always being a test subject and things of that nature. So those the impacts of like the Tuskegee study of Henrietta Lacks, of slavery, that's just a part of the that brought about the mistrust from African Americans when it comes to medical. I also would have to mention that, you know, just some of the not some, but a lot of the discrimination that Blacks have endured throughout the years has also been part of that as well, has been a cause of that. And sometimes even now, or here recently, or more recently, you could say that even when African Americans or Blacks go into the medical provider, they're not heard, or they don't have that advocate. And so they're discouraged from, you know, from the medical, you know, from medical or health, you know, or health, or the healthcare. So it's a lot that plays into it, not to mention some of the social determinants that are considered, that systemically oppress people, you know, people of color, especially Blacks and African Americans.
You can see this in problems in childbirth. Blacks and African Americans have a higher mortality rate for mother and child. And like Ashely said, sometimes they go to the medical provider and their symptoms, or basically anything that they're saying, is discounted as, and it's because there's this misbelief that comes that continues to be propagated, that they have a higher pain tolerance. And also, if that is one of the misconceptions that is still believed to this day, imagine any other ones that are still believed. So they're not being treated properly with the respect that any human person should deserve.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
So these experiences that you're telling me obviously are not my experience and may not be the experience of some people listening. Why is it so important not to question the legitimacy of someone else's experience?
I think one of the most important things to say is that the Black experience is it's layered, it's convoluted. It comes from various different aspects that we have to address. Just like Ashely said, of everything that they have experienced, they have and they have continued to be marginalized and oppressed. So when someone is sharing their experience, it could be just one story that you're hearing, but that doesn't make it any less true.
Mm-hmm.
So I think listening is one of the most important things, and acknowledging that everyone's experience is true to them. And
Mm-hmm.
when you hear that in a community, in a group of people, the stories continue to be the same, something is happening. There's a pattern, and action needs to be taken.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Ashely, do you want to jump into on this question?
Well, yeah, just like Krizia said, we have to be very mindful of people's experiences, not even the ones from history, but the ones currently. And one of the key factors that Krizia mentioned was we have to believe what people believe, what they believe, and take their experience as legitimate. It helps to listen, and it helps to listen silently to what is being said in that voice, and then take action how you see best, how you would see what you see will be best for that. If that is to connect them to a healthcare provider that is has the culture of humility to be cognizant of their needs. If it is to just be a part or read or take, even go to uh, quote unquote Hollywood and learn about, the immortal Henrietta Lacks or the Tuskegee study, or take a visit to Carter G. Woodson Institute at Berea. Just, embed yourself in that history so that better. Maya Angelou said, when you know better, you do better. And so we have that opportunity now to do better.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. You mentioned some ways to get involved in celebrating and experiencing Black History Month. Is there more that either of you want to add to that list of how we can get involved?
Oh my gosh. So this is the part that I would love to share. One of the things, I am really big on regionalism here in, your region in Kentucky. And Kentucky has a huge, rich, and unique history with many things beyond horses and bourbon. But with that, there's so many opportunities in your local communities that actually do celebrate Black History Month. So I would say check with your local chamber of commerce, your local visiting and tourism center, and probably your school systems. They will have many local events that will highlight the Black history of their community. And I think that is so important to know what goes on right there and where you are from, because it means a little more. It means a little more to you. And then one of the other things that I would suggest you do is take part in a culinary experience when it comes to Black history, or just history in general when it comes to Heritage Months. And I'm sure Krizia and I will talk more about it throughout the year. But oh my gosh, enjoy some of the different fruits and the flavors and experiences of soul food.
That sounds fun.
I would say there's a lot of things that you can do. We've mentioned a lot of them, like listen to different stories, see where they're coming from. That helps you learn and grow and get out of your comfort zone, because you're learning about someone else, another culture that is not your own, that is not the one that you're used to. I am currently actually reading called Dear White Friend. It's a book about a Black man sharing his stories here in America. And he's writing it as letters to his friends. So I might not be white, but the book still applies to me because I am not Black. So I see it as an opportunity for growth. And there might be stories that might make me feel uncomfortable. But like I said, when you are in that point and outside of your comfort zone, that's when you grow and you get to have more empathy for others. And that's important because especially for us that are in a field where human interaction is so important, we deal with patients every day, and we also interact with our coworkers. Empathy is crucial in the way we interact with humans. So I think that that's a good way. Also, go to museums, see the art, see the history. If you're here in Northern Kentucky, or if you want to take the drive in Cincinnati, there's a National Freedom Underground Center. I think I might be saying it wrong, but it's a museum dedicated to African American history. So please check it out. Like, take the time, take your family, do it as a date, and then grab some food in the area. And you can make it a whole day where you're dedicated to learning something that you wouldn't otherwise learn while still doing it in a fun way. Just like Ashely said, participate in the community. That's extremely important. And if you don't know how, ask someone who might be part of the community. Ask it in a nice way, not like, but like just go up to them and be like, hey, I want to learn more about Black history. How can I get involved? Where can I go? What can I do? What should I do? And listen to the suggestions that they have.
Mm-hmm.
And
Absolutely.
Heidi, one of the things that I would love to leave with our listeners is our mission here at Bluegrass Care Navigators is to provide expert connected care to the seriously ill. One of the things that we know and we recognize and should be the responsibility of all of us here at BCN is to make sure we provide that expert connected care to our seriously ill.
Mm-hmm.
And we recognize that people of color, especially Black people, do not utilize the services of our hospice and our palliative care.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that I would love, or I would encourage our team members to do, is to just share the wealth in those communities where we know that we're not where we're not represented.
Mm-hmm.
We know the good deeds of our hospice care and our palliative care and all of our BCN services. And there is a population of folks who do not take advantage of that. So if they have ideas or recommendations or connections that they can share with Krizia and I and the DE&I team, we would love for them to share those with us so we can connect those communities to the expert connected care that others are that are available to so many others.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Thank
Mhm.
you for sharing all of this and this list of ways to get involved that are like educational and fun, right?
Yes.
Um, but if listeners are anything like me, they hear this list and I feel like excited, also overwhelmed because now there's this whole list and I'm like, oh, I need to do it all. And so what is, if you're a little like me, feeling a little overwhelmed, what is like one first step to get started?
Oh, I can tell you, Krizia already said it earlier in the conversation. Be okay with being uncomfortable because
Mm,
there is no growth when it's comfortable.
Yep.
that's a
So
good,
start there.
okay.
And
Okay.
if you want to start with the small step, maybe if you have any streaming device, nowadays a lot of streaming devices have Black and African American movies. Like, for example, Netflix has a movie about Madam C.J. Walker. She was one of the first African American millionaires, and you'll learn how she became who she became and all the struggles that she went, both personally and as a woman. So that's a good way for you to take a
Okay.
small step outside of your comfort zone and learn about someone else while you're also learning history. Or if you want to learn, take another movie that might be fictional, but the stories are still relevant to us today and the
Awesome.
Black experience. So that's a good step
Mhm.
to go out of your comfort zone, but it's just a small step. I think it's just the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Or Heidi, they can open up their navigator notes on Tuesday and learn a little bit of history about local African Americans, regional African Americans from Kentucky as well.
I love it. I love the plug for Navigator
Yes.
Notes. So we're also highlighting these individuals on our social media pages throughout the month as well. So
Yeah.
you can look both places.
Awesome.
Um, this conversation has been great. I really appreciate how you've educated us. Before we wrap it up, is there anything else you'd like to say that we haven't already talked about?
I'm
Just be an
excited
advocate and be an
yeah,
ally.
and I'm excited to share some other DE&I talks and topics on the podcast.
Absolutely. Well, you guys are welcome back here anytime. I really appreciate the work that you're doing and the way that you are educating me and the entire BCN team. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.